Another story with a similar theme to The Great Escape is called The Ladder. I wrote it during a writing group assignment around 2009. The ladder. The ladder extends below me into infinity. From where I stand, I cannot see the ground. I feel somewhat suspended while holding on to the wooden rungs. The air is cold and heavy and limed in twilight. Not only do I not see the ground because of the sheer height of my location, but the ladder literally disappears into the darkness below me. This is where I came from. This is where my journey started. I have no recollection of when I took the first step, but it seems too long to remember. It might have been yesterday, but I doubt it. One rung looks like any other as I make my way up. There's no sudden change of scenery, no realization of where I am on the ladder. There's just the climb. Sometimes I think I'm so close to the bottom that I could just let go and land only a couple of feet below. At other times, I get the sense that if I were to let go now, I would fall forever, only to have to start all over. From a distance, the ladder looks like a single thin line of thread spun between the ground and the top of a vertical cliff, easily several thousand feet high. But from a distance, my thread is also not the only one. Because of the thick fog, I can't see that 4 feet away from me is another ladder. And behind that yet another, the row extending in perpetuity. If I were to look at it from even higher up, I would see that the cliff is not a straight vertical line from point A to point B, but a massive circle stretching out for miles with no beginning and no end. For years I have been convinced that mine was the only ladder and I have been the only one climbing. Now, especially in times when I close my eyes while climbing, I can hear voices beside me. The whispers are sometimes so quiet I can easily block them out. At other times I cannot but hear and listen to them. The fog seemed to isolate me from the other ladders for the longest time. Now it is as if the fog's density is lessening just a tiny bit. The voices I hear sometimes are voices of agony and pain, of hopelessness and despair. But there are others as well. These are filled with hope and a sense of the utter beauty of the sheer size of this undertaking. There are millions of ladders, each reaching into the heavens, all occupied by one person, all with one single purpose: to reach the end of the ladder. To come out of the darkness and to breathe the fresh air again, to touch the green, green grass of home once again, and to be free. Sometimes I just stand at one rung for a long time, my mind in a haze, for I have lost the purpose of the climb. But then I hear a voice through the fog. Very quietly it calls to me from one of the others. "Where are you?" it whispers. And then I remember and I start climbing again, and as I climb, I can feel the sense of urgency in me not to hold on to any of the rungs for too long. Just keep climbing, I think to myself. Just keep climbing. I hear a voice next to me. It occurs to me that were we to realize that we are all together, each on our ladder but still joined in our single purpose, we would make sure nobody would stay behind. That we would feel fortified by one another. Sometimes all it takes is for the one next to us to wait a few minutes so we can catch up. We can't pull each other up, but we can wait for one another. And what function can be holier than to wait for a brother or a sister, to have them next to us again, and not lose sight of one another in the darkness of the fog? Here lie our destiny and our function alike. It seems to be a contradiction that waiting for one another would get us up the ladder more quickly. But such are the laws of our journey home, implemented for our protection and in place to assure our swift progress up the ladder. And one day the fog will lift, and we will all, each and every one of us, take the last rung and step off the ladder and into a home that we have never left. This next one came out of a reflection on my thoughts and how they tie me down like strings tie down a hot air balloon. It also touched on the previously mentioned theme of the sparrow and the eagle. The Sparrow and the Eagle. I had a thought this morning. What if I were to let go of all of my thoughts? What would happen? I saw myself standing inside the basket of a small hot air balloon that was tied to the ground by hundreds of strings. Each string was attached to a thought. There were thoughts of fear over money and the economy, thoughts of aloneness and of being by myself. There were thoughts of how my past had been and how my future could be, thoughts and dreams of how much money I wanted to have, who I wanted to live with, and where. There were thoughts of starting and ending previous relationships and of regret over things I did or did not do in the past. There were thoughts of accomplishments and triumphs, of failures and of feeling incomplete. There were loving and unloving thoughts towards other people, and there were loving and unloving thoughts toward myself. There were thoughts of how my business should work and thoughts of how my life should work, and there were many, many more. Each of the individual thoughts was attached to one of the strings, and the strings themselves were tied to the bottom of the basket. As I looked up into the sky, I thought about what would happen if I were to cut the strings. I'd probably shoot straight up into space and die from lack of oxygen, or freeze to death somewhere in the outer atmosphere. Strong winds will take me and smash me against the side of a mountain where nobody will find me. I saw myself lying somewhere, all my limbs broken, unable to move and unable to call for help. I saw the balloon go way up only to collapse and crash to the ground moments later. I realized that those thoughts were part of the very weight that held the balloon firmly on this earth. Okay, I might as well try it now rather than wait much longer. The sun was setting and I surely didn't want to do this during the night. And there just happened to be shiny scissors on the floor of the basket, as if beckoning. So I took the scissors and began to cut the strings, 5 or 10 at a time, all the way around the basket. What was interesting was that when I got to the last string, the balloon still wasn't moving, as if one small thought was holding it back, keeping it anchored. As I cut the last string, the balloon gently lifted off. I expected it to kind of shoot up very quickly. Instead, a soft breeze took it and lifted it gently. I saw the world below me, the meadow from which I started, trees, some houses, part of a road. As I passed above the tree line, a magnificent vista opened up in front of me. Rolling hills as far as my eyes could see, and in the distance what must have been the ocean. The air was so clear, it felt like I could see for hundreds of miles in the distance. A lightness of being enveloped me. I felt more and more weightless. The sense of freedom was indescribable. A deep calm set in. This was completely unexpected, and yet at the same time it felt as if it was the most natural state I have ever been in. I felt utterly at home. This is my natural state of being, and nothing I ever thought might bring me happiness or fulfillment or escape had even the slightest resemblance with what I experienced at that moment. Everything I ever thought about anything, every fantasy, every dream, every feeling and every thought, as lofty as it had seemed at the time, has probably prevented me from having this experience. How long I stayed in my balloon, I do not remember. Was it eternity or a single instant? I do not know. It matters not. This instant was enough to show me, to unmistakably reveal the purpose of the journey of my life. As to my thoughts tugging at me, weighing me down, they returned. And yet for moments of sweetness, their hold on me dissipates, having now known the freedom of flight. Of this episode, one single question remains. When I ask again who I am, who will I ask? The Course says, when this power has once been experienced, it is impossible to trust one's own petty strength again. Who would attempt to fly with the tiny wings of a sparrow when the mighty power of an eagle has been given him? A Course in Miracles, Manual for Teachers, 4.1, 2, 1-2. The next three pieces all have brotherly love as a theme. They tap into the same source, just from a slightly different angle. They were short but very powerful, and even though I can't get to the eternal place they describe very often, they point toward it, witnessing through the fact that it is possible to leave the ego thought system, even if for now, only for a limited time. The Temple. There's a Stewart's gas station in Rosendale, on the corner of Route 32 and 213. I pass this intersection almost every day on my way to work. One evening a few years back, I remember the sun was just setting. I came down Route 32 and stopped at the traffic light, right across from the Stewart's building. Maybe it was the way the light of the evening sky illuminated it and made it appear slightly surreal, but I suddenly had the very strong notion that the gas station wasn't a gas station at all. It was a temple. Not so much in the sense that people were going there to worship or pray like in a church. No. It was simply a place of holiness. I felt that the people who worked there and the people who got their gas and bought lottery tickets, their newspapers and hot dogs, each one of them radiated such holiness that it took my breath away. As I sat in my car looking out the window and watching the comings and goings for a while, there was such love emanating from the building, pouring outward and towards me. Everyone who went inside or came out the door was completely enveloped in this love. There was no sorrow, no frailty, no pain or grief. Only the utmost honor from everyone to everyone. As the traffic light turned green, I stood there for a moment longer until somebody behind me honked their horn and I drove off. Since then, going to Stewart's to get a chocolate milkshake, a cup of coffee or a gallon of milk has never been the same. We have everything else. I never wrote about this before, never brought it down on paper. It was never clear to me, yet I had a vague sense of it at times, quickly forgotten soon thereafter, and then unremembered for days at a time. It stood so clear in my mind just moments ago, and I'm afraid it is already fading fast. I know if I don't catch it now, it will disappear again. There is no other goal or purpose of any relationship we have ever entered in other than this one single thing. To tell each other, in whatever words, acts, or thoughts are available to us at that moment, that we are forgiven. That nothing you did or I did, or that we both failed to do, has had any effect at all. This is what we owe each other, nothing less and nothing more. It is all we need. We have everything else. There's love, and there's the call for it. Those are the two emotions of the world. I lost it again. I remember the words, but I have lost the experience. It slipped through my fingers. Actually, to be perfectly honest, I have blocked it out. I've let it go. Not sure when I'm able to take it back again, but I know I'm the one doing it. When I have the experience, it is the clearest, most natural state I can imagine, and I can't even fathom how it would be without it. And when I give it away, it is as if I never had it in the first place. But I know my heart isn't ready yet, ready to take it in fully, to keep it as my natural inheritance, and to make it my own. It is not yet the only experience I want. Otherwise I would have it. I would have it always. And so I must wait for myself, and for when the time comes when I can no longer live without it. The Great Hall. I see a great golden hall perched high on top of a hill, with white marble walls and golden pillars in front. The following words are engraved above the large wooden entrance door. The call for love. Inside the great hall, mounted to one of the walls, is a large, thick plate of gold. Thereon is written, "The call for love is made and answered for all by all." The names are legion. but behind each one is the same fervent call for God. The call takes many shapes, appears in many religions, colors, cultures, languages, genders, and countries. You can find it everywhere. In every pain and fear, in every hurt and hurting, in every friend and foe, in everything that lives and everything that seems to have no life at all. It is in you as well as it is in me. It is in your father, in your mother, in your sister and in your brother, in your son and in your daughter, in your policeman, your mayor, your car mechanic, your carpenter, and your president. It is in prisoners and guards, in soldiers and in husbands, in wives, in doctors and lawyers, in rich men and poor. It is in everyone, because it is in you. The shape does not matter. It may conceal the call, but only if you wish it so. The call is there, present always, waiting to be answered, so that peace can come to every heart, so that love can make a home throughout the world at last. The call for love is made and answered for all, by all, from you to everyone, and from everyone to you. Those three experiences, I realized again, were impossible to write down. I was able to describe them, but failed to convey the feeling that accompanied each one. I learned over time that the right mind, the place within us where Jesus and his love abides, is as of yet so alien to us and so deeply associated with fear, we don't go there at all. And if we do, the experience is so completely different from anything we have experienced in this world, we can't manage it. So we return to our normal self, and the love we felt becomes but an echo that soon vanishes. Only the slightest memory remains. That sliver of a thought keeps calling to us, and every loneliness and despair, every depression and fear, every pain and sorrow are nothing but different clothes we put onto that one thought that calls us to return to the safety of our home within us. The next essay I wrote after another session with Julie. It is probably the one most closely reflective of my relationship with Jesus. Where will you lead me? I'm lying on Julie's table in her practice and think about her question, where in your body do you feel the fear? I can feel pressure in my upper lungs just below my collarbones, I answer. At this moment an image comes to me that seems too violent and too painful to even mention. But with Julie, I decided a long time ago not to edit what comes up and to just tell her. Whatever it is in very good hands with her. I hang from two butcher hooks that are driven through my muscles just below the collarbones, I tell her. She asks me if possible to stay with the image, as painful as that might be, to see where it leads me. Maybe you can find out why you hang there and what and who brought you. I was at my writing group earlier that morning with my friend Jenny. I had been working on a synopsis for a script I had written some 5 years back that almost got optioned but never sold. It recently came back into my awareness and I thought I'd give it another shot. After I read the synopsis to Jenny, she asked me when I would start writing the script. I told her that it had been finished years ago. I will call my very good friend in the city right now. She's a talent agent and she'll read it if I ask her to. That was all it took for me to experience my spine being dipped into ice water and hot coals at the same time. I started to feel anxious and almost immediately and got up to walk around her store. Can you wait till I'm gone and call her afterward? I asked her. You're nervous. Why are you nervous? You're making me nervous, she replied. For years I thought of ways to get my script in front of the right people, but never really went all out with it. I had never asked Jenny, and she of course never told me about her friend of 20 years who is a major agent. Jenny, God bless her, called anyway while I was there and talked to her friend. I sent the script to her that same day. My next stop of the day was Julie. After I told her of the 2 other instances when one of my scripts was almost optioned and rather than excited I was flooded with stress, we agreed to do some table work. So here I am, in my mind, hanging from 2 butcher hooks, somewhere in a medieval castle. After Julie's question about how I got there in the first place, I see a large dining hall filled with people. They are mostly peasants and farmers, very poor people. I'm handing out some sort of flyers and then get up on a table to tell them that they have to fight for their rights, that they should not take their terrible lot in life anymore, and that they should stand up for themselves. I think I am not one of them. I tell Julie, I realize that I'm about 18 years old and probably either the king's son or the duke's son. I'm also fully aware that the guards will arrive in any minute or so, and even though I'm very fearful, I keep doing what I'm doing, talking to the people and trying to get them to stand up and fight for themselves. The next thing I see are guards rushing into the room and taking me. I'm being pulled through a long hallway while a couple of the guards beat me. Then I'm thrown into a large room and onto the hard stone floor. In the next scene, I hang from the butcher hooks from the ceiling. Then someone comes into the room. Must be the Duke or the King, and he's probably my father. He looks at me in disgust, spits at me, turns and leaves without a word. Next thing I know, I lie in the stone floor of some sort of a prison cell. The holes where the butcher hooks penetrated my body are healed and overgrown with deformed flesh. From where I lie, I can see the outline of the cell. There's an indentation in the dirt floor around the perimeter of the cell, as if I or somebody had walked there for a long time and the path was actually lower than the rest of the cell floor. I look down on myself from above. I'm very thin, naked, and very old, with a long beard and thin legs and arms. I have been here for 60 years at least. For some strange reason, I'm at peace with the situation. I don't feel any fear or hatred or anger at all, just very peaceful. At that moment, I can actually feel that the table I'm lying on in Julie's practice is the stone floor of my cell. The strangest sensation of the two scenes happening simultaneously creeps into my awareness. I can't put my finger on it, but it feels as if both are happening right now. Then I see stairs made of stone above my head, leading upward into the darkness. As I sit up from the stone floor, I can see that the stairs reach very far, almost to the heavens, I think to myself. At that moment, a light appears all the way up at the other end of the stairs. It is soft and inviting, and my first thought is that I'm probably supposed to walk towards it and that this is somehow how I am going to die. But instead, the light seems to move downward toward me. With the light, I see a figure coming closer. I know this is Jesus. I have had visions before where Jesus appeared in one way or another. This must be one of the strongest. He comes down the stairs, together with the light, and as it touches my head, he arrives next to me. He goes down on one knee and smiles at me while helping me up. I feel such relief at that moment. It is indescribable. My chest seems to expand and my breathing becomes light and easy. My body seems to weigh nothing. "Come on, old friend," he says. I stand next to him as he puts his arms around me in an embrace. Tears stream down my cheeks, both in the vision and on the table. The love coming from him is overwhelming. At some point we let go and he slowly starts going up the steps. As I follow, a question comes to me. "Where will you lead me?" I ask. "To our Father's house," he answers. The theme of Jesus waiting for me has recurred many times. It is something I can feel deep within me. It is covered up most of the time, like 99.99% of the time, but I always come back to it. During those moments when I know he's there, I realize that I spent my whole life at once pushing him away and searching for him. An impossible scenario if you look at it from my perspective. However, from this point of view, his answer to me pushing him away is love. So is his answer to my search for him. Both are the same. The next poem is based on the phrase, "a stream of stars," in the Song of Prayer, a supplement to A Course in Miracles. A stream of stars. A stream of stars forever calls us home, to where we will return, to where we still belong. Our hands reach to the heavens, our footsteps light the world, our holy voices joined together, no longer left unheard. As every voice awakens and every dreamer stirs, a song arises thousandfold across the universe. It heralds in a time close to eternity, where everyone remembers our ancient memory. The doors have long since opened, unlocked the gates of time. The path to truth is open. The stars are now aligned. To start an ancient journey to where we've always been, to follow our own yearning, to gather our own kin. Our fate is sealed. Our destiny is written in the sky. Our home at last revealed, we will not pass it by. Our radiance will light our step and strengthen our radiance will light our path and strengthen our step. To leave behind all loneliness, all frailty and all lack. And then one day the sands of time will vanish from our hearts and leave no trace of them behind except a stream of stars. Probably the most elaborate visual journey happened towards the end of 2008. It's called My Life's Script. At one of the course's workshops, back at the foundation, one of the teachers suggested that at some point we each go to the place in our mind where we had written the script for this life. During one of the sessions with Julie, I had a strange symbol in my head and drew it on a piece of paper. It looked like a hand scythe. I couldn't make anything of it at first. I also had no idea what it had to do with my life's script. My life's script. When I concentrated on the image in my head, I saw it embedded in a landscape that I looked at from a bird's perspective. I realized that what I saw wasn't a drawing at all. It was the top of what appeared to be a large pyramid or a Mayan temple. The top was square, and the image I saw was actually the entrance to a round opening, not unlike a well. The lines across the crescent-shaped object were steps going downward. And then I saw the temple from the outside. Long stairs went straight up to a plateau. I saw myself on top of the temple, looking back down the steep stairs. This, I thought, symbolizes my spiritual journey. Did I come to this point only to go back down again? This moment of frustration dissipated relatively quickly, though. I was always convinced that a spiritual journey is a journey of preparation and not much else. Climbing up the long and steep stairs on the outside of the pyramid somehow prepared me for the next step, to enter the pyramid and climb inside. I followed the path toward the large opening. The view of the valley below was magnificent. I looked at the vast opening in the pyramid's peak, a black round hole. I began to descend down the stone stairs that seemed to just come out of the wall. I wasn't aware at first that there was water all around the perimeter of the opening, flowing down the walls. After a while, I realized that to make only one full circle would bring me way down below the line of light and into complete darkness. I set one foot after another and went from bright light to twilight and into a blackness so complete I couldn't see my hand. I was suddenly afraid I would accidentally step off the stairs and fall. The only thing stopping me was the sound of the water that ran down the wall. I could hear it next to me and realized that if I just stayed close to its sound, I would probably be fine. I thought for a moment that the water was my guide, like love on a spiritual quest, guiding me and keeping me from stumbling into darkness. For a while, nothing happened. It was just one step after another. Then, without any forewarning, the stone stairs ended and I stepped into thin air. For a moment I was suspended, hovering there, until I fell, a tiny speck in a massive cave. The arch of the ceiling spanned at least a mile in either direction, touching the ground far in the distance. There was a very intense light, like the light of the sun, streaming down from a point in the arch and illuminating the landscape below. Beams of light spilled into the hills below, As I landed gently on the grass, I looked up and saw the now very small opening high above. I began to walk, and after only a few minutes I saw a large leather-bound book lying in the grass. I sat down and opened its cover. I knew that this was what I was looking for. My life's script. There was just one word in the center of the page. Alone. I looked at the word, thinking briefly about the times in my life when I felt alone. It was mostly after my parents separated. Alone. I knew this feeling very well. Not that I experience it all the time, but I am definitely familiar with its emotional footprint on my soul. I turned the page. Again, just one word. Separate. The white page around it made the word even more prominent. I turned the page again. Abandonment. I turned the page again. On the left side, I saw names. Hundreds of names. As I read through them, I realized that these were all the people I knew, from when I was in kindergarten, through school, and my teenage years, into adulthood, and up until now. The page was filled with names, including my parents, former girlfriends and wives, my son, my sister, my friends, etc. On the opposite side of the page were but two words. Find me. I turned the page again. On the left side was what looked like a spreadsheet. It showed amounts I owed on credit cards, my mortgage payments, several tax returns, bank accounts, expenses, incomes, etc. The page was filled with numbers. It was basically a summary of my financial situation. On the right side, again, just two words. Find me. I turned the page again. On the left side was the drawing of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. On the right side, the same two words. Find me. The remainder of the pages were empty. This is it, I wondered? This is my life's script, alone, separate, abandonment, and find me? I closed the book, and as I looked up, there was a massive cross suspended in the air in front of me, about 50 feet above the ground. It was made of light, emitting a slight glow against the gray sky. As I looked around, I saw behind me a wooden bench, like the ones you find in a church. Another bench appeared in front of me, then one behind me. More appeared until there were two columns of benches, just like in a large church. I sat quietly for a while, by myself, close to the center aisle. I thought this must have been the remnants of an old cathedral at some point. No walls were left, just the benches, the altar, and the golden cross in the sky. Now, one by one, people appeared on the benches. They were colleagues of mine, current friends, my parents, best friend from high school, my son and his mother, my girlfriend and her daughter, a few clients of mine, some people I only met once in my life but had some kind of a connection to, and others. The church filled with people before my eyes. It was the most beautiful thing to watch. Everyone sat there in deep reverence, wordlessly. The faces I looked at were completely free of any fear, conflict, or sorrow. There was no pain in them, whatever each of their situation had been before. There was a deep yet soft expression of gratitude, honor, and love. Gone were any past conflicts, hurts, wounds, and disappointments. It felt that on this holy ground we shared, where we all came from didn't matter. Our past never existed, and all of us were in a state far beyond our small self. Each of the faces was so incredibly beautiful that I started to cry. There was nothing between us except complete understanding that we were not separate, that abandonment was impossible, and that we could never truly be alone. I sat there for a long time looking at the faces, being deeply touched by the expression of utter love emanating from each one of them. Slowly, out of nowhere, I heard a chorus in the background. It wasn't really singing, more like a humming. One single note from all of us reaching toward the heavens, uniting everything within its glorious grace. The work in Julie's practice I intensified over time. I think I had gained enough trust in her to let my boundaries and limitations dissipate, at least enough to make a difference in my life. The outcome was sometimes quite stunning, and the more I stopped editing my inner stories and let them emerge, the more beneficial they became to me.